Hey everybody, and welcome to Learning from Smart People. I am your host, Rob Oliver, and some of you may be saying to me, hey Rob, what happened? You only released one episode last week. You didn't release two like you were supposed to. The Thursday episode didn't happen. And so for those of you that would say that, there are a number of things that I would say. Originally, my first response would have been like, hey, mind your own business. This is my podcast, and I'll release when I want to. However, after thinking about it and after having a different perspective on it, what I'm actually thinking is, you know what? Thank you for noticing. Thank you for being a loyal enough fan that you have listened to the show and that you know the pattern. You know that every Tuesday and Thursday there's an episode coming out. You know that this is where you come. This is what you expect. You are a fan. And because you're a fan, I say thank you. Thank you for caring enough to notice. Thank you for caring enough to not send me a blazing, scathing email that says, hey, Rob, you're terrible. You're not keeping up with your own schedule. But you've kept your thoughts to yourself. You've been gracious. You've been kind. And for those of you that have done this, thank you. And I will tell you that I appreciate it, and I will see what I can do to make it up to you. So with that all being said, here's where I really want to start, and that is I want to talk today about perspective. Because in that exact conversation that I just had, technically with myself, but with you, it was all about a change in perspective. Because it became not about me, but it became about you. There's a part of me that is defensive, and so when somebody comes at me like that, I want to stick up for myself, and I want to make a grandiose defense to say, hey, you don't understand what's going on, you don't understand what happened, and plus, it's my prerogative. But I am not doing this podcast for me. I'm doing this podcast for you. And to me, that makes it very important to have your perspective, to have that understanding, and to know you're not mad at me. At least I hope you're not mad at me. And you're not coming after me to grill me or to make me feel bad or to put me in a bad spot. Hopefully, the sentiment behind you saying there was only one instead of two is to say that you missed one. You were looking for something from this podcast and it wasn't there. And that to me is a huge value. It's a huge benefit. It's a blessing to me to know there are people looking for this. And so here's the one thing I will ask you to do is if you are one of those people and you're listening to this podcast today and you say, hey, Rob, I did notice that you missed one, shoot me an email. It's rob@learningfromsmartpeople.com or head over to the learningfromsmartpeople.com website, use the contact form, and just send me something to say, hey, you know what? I noticed. I wasn't mad. Just let me know what your thoughts were about the fact that I did miss one. Okay? That would be huge. And I will tell you really what got me thinking about this whole concept of perspective and about the idea of looking at things from a different point of view was this. I came across a book this week, and the book was called, seriously, Cinderella is so annoying. And so feel free to go look up the book, read it. I think it's absolutely a hoot. I also think that it is a real eye-opener from this reason. It is written from the perspective of the quote-unquote wicked stepmother. Okay? And I've never thought about things from the perspective of the stepmother, but here, think about this. She marries this man who has a daughter. She moves into this large house, which apparently needs a lot of cleaning. And it's her and her two daughters. And here is Cinderella. And Cinderella goes around and she is happy all the time. And I don't know if anyone in your house has some difficulty waking up in the morning. But in our house, there are people that are a little bit slow to wake up. And when someone comes down and is chipper and bubbly and happy, and it's like, hey, good morning, everybody, they are not too receptive to that. And then on top of being happy and always just full of joy and glee, she tells these stories. And the stories are incredible and absolutely unbelievable. And she tells stories about the animals and about the different birds that help her with things. And the robins don't get along with the sparrows. And then when it comes to doing ironing, there's the mice and the rats, but the mice don't like the rats. But, you know, these stories are, they're ridiculous. And besides that, she always is telling stories about her friends, the animals. And again, in our house, if you think about this, I'm the dad. I tell dad jokes. And how many times does my family roll their eyes because it's like, here he goes again with another story, with another dad joke. And it can be a little, I'll give them a little credit. It can be a little annoying, right? They haven't told me it's a lot annoying. Maybe sometimes it is. But here's Cinderella, and she's happy. She's telling stories. The stories are pointless. They're ridiculous. They make no sense. And besides all of that, it comes time for this ball. And in the book, go buy the book. Read the book. It's challenging. But in it, the stepmom is concerned about Cinderella's health and says, hey, why don't you stay home? And you're not feeling well. And so in direct defiance of this whole thing, Cinderella leaves the house. Cinderella is not the hero of the story. And Cinderella is actually just, as the title of the book says, seriously, Cinderella is so annoying. Now, that book really got me thinking. And this is not the first time that we've had these other characters' perspective. Books that have been written, movies that have been done, shows that have come up. So, for example, one of the iconic movies of the 1980s was The Karate Kid. And in The Karate Kid, you have this classic back and forth battle between Daniel and Johnny. And it's just, somebody took the time to analyze it and say, what if Johnny was the good guy and Daniel was the bully? And they did a whole thing about it. And as a matter of fact, there's a TV series, and I think it's online somewhere, called Cobra Kai, and it actually comes from the perspective that maybe Johnny really wasn't the bad guy. But this idea is that sometimes the way that we have, for lack of a better term, always looked at things may not be the only way to look at things. In talking about this and in thinking about it, in doing a little bit of research on it, I came across a very cool, like one frame comic. And it's a guy who is on a small deserted island. And he sees coming towards him a guy in a boat. And the guy on the island is like, yes, a boat. Finally, I'm rescued. The guy in the boat, it's a small boat, it's a rowboat, and he looks and he says, finally, land, I can rest. Both of them are looking at the exact same situation. But because they are coming at it from different angles, they have different histories, they have different perspectives, they're seeing something different. The actuality is neither one of them is rescued. Now what you have is you have two men on an island with one boat, and they have no idea where they are. They have no idea how they're getting off. They're no closer to being rescued than they were when they started. But both of them had hope. And then as they look at the reality of what their hope was, they realize it wasn't exactly as wonderful as it originally seemed. As a writer, I'm familiar with this concept of the writer's or the writing perspective, right? So my first two books were autobiographical, and because of that, they are written in the first person perspective. They're written from my point of view. I can't tell you what anyone else is thinking. I can only tell you what they said. I can only explain how it felt to me. I can only talk about what it made me think. I can only talk about the tone that I think I picked up from it. I can only look at the story, and I can only tell you the story from the first person perspective, from my point of view. My third book, which is Who, Me, Yeah, You, and it's the kids' anti-bullying book, that is written from the second person perspective. Because in that book, it's not coming from the main character's point of view, it's coming from an outside perspective. So in that book, I know what all of the characters say. I know what the characters are thinking. I can explain how they feel, all of those things, because no longer is it just from my perspective. Now, I kind of have that outside, I don't want to overstate this, but I have that kind of deity experience where I am telling you, I'm giving you the insight into knowing what is going on behind the scenes with everybody. And as a result of that, you get perspective into everyone that you can't get. That is something that can't happen in a nonfiction book. It can only happen in a fictional book. Because in a fictional book, it's the only place where the writer can give you the perspective of everybody. Because the writer knows everybody, because everybody exists only in the writer's mind. So in that way, the writer is able to share with you the completeness of it. There is also the third person perspective, in which there is somebody who is not part of the action, but is there, and they're writing about what they see. So again, they don't know about what people are thinking, about what people, they're only seeing what people are saying. They're only seeing what people are doing, and they are just recording that. In some ways, I would liken that a little bit to like a journalist, right? A journalist goes to an event, they see the people, they can talk to the people, they hear what the people are saying, they see what the people are doing, but they're just reporting on the facts. They're just reporting on what they see, and they're giving you things from their perspective. They don't know behind the scenes, they don't know they're just telling you what they see. So even in that simple idea of writing, there are different perspectives. And it's so important as you look at those different perspectives that it helps you understand what you're reading and what you're looking at. When it comes to life, I really have come to understand this. We can only see things through our own eyes. As a nonfiction autobiographical writer, I can only tell you what I'm seeing, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, right? In life, I can only tell you what I'm feeling, I'm thinking, I'm seeing, that's all I got. That's all I can give you is my perspective. And Tom Petty, I'm sorry to do this to you guys, but Tom Petty wrote a song that said, "You don't know how it feels to be me." And that is a very real thing. As a matter of fact, there are very few people in the world that have a similar situation to mine. There's not nearly as many quadriplegics in the world as there are. It's a small percentage of the population. And of those, how many of them are married? How many of them are entrepreneurs? How many of them have triplets? How many of them live in Pittsburgh? Just how many of them have the health concerns that I do? All of these things mean I am pretty unique. And I'm going to tell you, you are pretty unique also. There's nobody else like you. It's kind of hard to imagine this, but we live in a world of unicorns. Each of us is unique. I've got triplets, okay? They're all 18 years old, but my joke about them from day one has been this. They are as different as night, day, and peanut butter. Because I've got a boy and two girls. And my two girls, one is brown-eyed, brown-haired. One is blue-eyed, blonde. The likes that they have, the food that they want, there are so many things about them that are different. And even though they were all born on the same day, within 3 minutes of each other, they were all raised by the same parents in the same house, they all are different, and they look at things differently, and they see things differently, even though their experiences are somewhat similar. They each can only see it through their own eyes. And so I don't know what it feels like to be you. As a matter of fact, I can't even try to know what it feels like to be you. I can empathize a little bit. I can support you. I can be there for you. Whatever it is that I can do to help in people's lives, that is something that I'm willing to put out there. But I can't say, I know how you feel, because I don't know how you feel. And in that way, I think it's really important as we're looking around our country right now, we can't see things from someone else's perspective. And so we're looking at the concept of racial tension and of prejudice and bias and stigma, all of these things that people are saying, I'm experiencing these on a daily basis. And maybe that's not your experience, and you're saying their perspective may not resonate with you. They're saying that's not my understanding of the world. That's not my experience of the world. But again, you don't know how it feels to be them. I can have a small perspective on this, and here's why. I acquired my disability when I was 21, so I have 21 years of living without a disability, and now I've got 27 years of living with a disability. And I have been on both sides of the fence with this. And so I know what it was like living without. I know what it's like living with. And I've got that dual perspective. I know how easy it was for me to get a job before my injury. I know how difficult it has been for me to get a job after my injury. What has changed? Not the essential nature of who I am. My personality, my outlook, my intellect, all of these things are the same, but what has changed has been my physical condition. And somehow that makes a difference. And so I have an understanding of living without a disability. I have an understanding of living with a disability. But what I don't have an understanding of what it's like to be African American in the United States of America in 2020. I don't have the perspective of what it's like to be a woman. I don't have the perspective of what it's like to be raised in a single parent home. I don't know what it's like to experience poverty. I don't know what it's like to be you. I don't know what it's like to be anyone else except me. I'm an expert on being me. I'm really good at being me. As a matter of fact, when I do presentations for medical professionals, the title of the presentation is Robology 101. And the reason is this: they've studied radiology, or they've studied pulmonology, or whatever it is that they've studied. They have a study of some part of the body. What I have a study of is I am a specialist in Rob. I have studied me for 48 years, and I know me, and I know how I operate. And that's what I bring to the table. That's my perspective. And what I need them to understand is, listen, I'm bringing my expertise in myself. You're bringing your expertise in your field of study. And now let's work together and respect each other's perspective so that we can come to a mutually agreeable plan of treatment that is going to work for both of us, and that will be effective, and that will actually achieve the desired outcome that we both have. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. It's a willingness to say, I have a perspective, you have a perspective. Let's respect each other's outlook. Respect the way that we see the world, and let's sit down and talk about how do we come to something that works, that helps us all to move forward. This applies not just in the race relations, not just in discrimination, not just because, listen, I had to come to grips with the fact that prejudice, bias, and stigma all exist. They are out there. But what I had to come to understand was they exist in other people. And because they exist in other people, they don't change my own value. And I think that's something I have mentioned on here before. And so if you're going through life and you're experiencing that difficulty where you are being discriminated against, you're experiencing someone thinking less of you because of some descriptor, age, gender, race, religion, whatever it is, and they are discriminating against you because of that. I want you to take this to heart, and I want you to hear it very loud and very clear. Your value comes from the fact that you are a human being, and no one can take that value away from you. You are an amazing creation. You are an amazing individual, and the only prerequisite that qualifies you as amazing is being human. That's it. As a human, you are fantastic. Now, that does not make it easy to live in a world where you are experiencing that discrimination. What I would love to see the world change, but I want to start with that understanding that it's you. You are absolutely unique. You are one of a kind. You are a unicorn. There's no one else like you. And you have value. And when no one else sees that value, when you feel that there's someone who is putting you down, denigrating you, telling you that you're less than, that's not a reflection on who you are. That's a reflection on who they are. And the fact is that their life is missing out on something because they are not establishing that relationship with you. They're not seeing you for who you are. They are missing out on something very valuable and very amazing because their perspective is flawed. Their perspective is off. And what they're looking at is not what's really important. What they're looking at and what they're focused on is something that is spurious, something that is completely and totally unrelated to your value. The color of your skin, your gender, whatever it is, these are not the things that give you value. It's your humanity. I think about this because I've been trying to figure out how to say this without completely and totally sounding like I'm tooting my own horn, okay? And if this comes across as being self-promotion and being just patting myself on the back, I hope that, you know what, feel free to roast me. Feel free to send me a scathing email that says, Rob, you are just about self-aggrandizement. You are just full of yourself. But let me tell you this. When I go through life, what is important to me is making an impact on the world around me. I have a variety of skills that I have acquired. The reason why I started this podcast, right? Learning from smart people. Why did I start it? Because I want to learn. I want to bring in people that know more than I do and find out from them what has been their success in the world. What can I learn from them about making myself better, making my business better, making a better impact on the world? And so as a lifelong learner, I've picked up a lot of information. And so when I was out there and I'm applying for a job before I decided to become an entrepreneur, but before I decided to be my own boss, I'm out there and I'm interviewing and I'm doing all these things. And when I'm coming away from those interviews and I'm just absolutely down in the dumps because I'm not getting a call back and I'm not getting hired, it wasn't until I am where I am today that I can look back on it and I can say, there is something that those employers missed out on by not bringing me in to be part of their organization. And whether that's a certain skill set, whatever it is, I will tell you this. There is a level of dedication, a level of expertise, and a level of enthusiasm that I bring into everything that I do. And those three things they have missed out on. And whatever the reason is, whether it's bias, whether, whatever, it's true to me that they've missed out on those things. because they saw my disability instead of seeing my potential, instead of seeing my skill set, instead of seeing me. I really don't think I can emphasize this enough. We deal with prejudice. It's something that exists. And the reason is this. In our DNA, we've been equipped with this idea to make quick decisions, right? And when a lion is running towards us, we don't have time to think, is this a friendly lion or is this a mean lion? It's a lion. We make a quick decision. We run away. When we're dealing with other human beings, we've got to make sure that we're not doing that same thing and making a quick judgment and saying, okay, they fit this mold, they fit this stereotype, they look like this, they sound like this, they act like this, and I'm making a judgment. Listen, the ability to prejudge, the tendency to prejudge, that prejudgment characteristic is what helps us survive. And we have to acknowledge it and say, yes, this is part of my DNA, this is part of being human, but I am going to make a conscious choice to not do this, to have a perspective that values other people, that's looking to see what is in them. It's looking to acknowledge they come from a different background than I do, they come from a different experience. And when we all bring in a perspective that says, I'm valuing other people, I'm understanding that they see things that are in a different way than I do, that is when we're going to make this world a better place to live. And let me just throw this out there. One of the prime examples I see of this is the reaction that we have to COVID-19. There are multiple perspectives on this. There are business owners out there who are saying that, as a small business owner myself, there are many conferences and speaking engagements that have been canceled. And my business has taken a hard hit from this. And I'm thinking, what can be done to save my business, to save my livelihood, to help me pay my bills? Let's get back to business as quickly as possible. That's the business owner's perspective. And it is a valid perspective because the government has no money of its own. All of the money that the government has is money that is taken away from other people. And that happens in the form of taxes. So where do taxes come from? Taxes come from businesses. And so if businesses can't run, then there's no money generated, then there's no taxes generated. And so we end up in this bad cycle because eventually the government's going to run out of money if businesses aren't running. A very, very valid perspective. Then there's another perspective, which is as a part of a vulnerable population, as someone with a disability, I am much more susceptible to COVID and the results of COVID. And the fact is, if I end up contracting COVID, I will likely end up on a ventilator for an extremely long time, if not something worse than that, okay? So I can't afford to get this. And so as a vulnerable population, my fear is I've got to take every precaution I can to keep myself safe. And then there's the medical professionals who have the perspective of we're looking out for the greater good and weighing up the value between business and health and just everything all together. There are so many perspectives on it. And what I'm asking for all of us is let's be gracious in our perspective. And if someone has a different perspective than I do, if they are not a mask person and I am, well, you know what? Let me be respectful of the non-mask people and say, you don't have to wear a mask, but be respectful of me and understand that I may not be willing to be around you because you're not wearing a mask. And in that way, let's just respect each other and not fight about it and be willing just to let it go. So as I wrap up, I'm just going to remind you of this. If we are going to be successful in understanding other people, in building relationships, in making this world a better place, we need to understand that we can only see things through our perspectives. We need to understand that other people have a perspective that is valid. And we need to figure out how we can bring all of our perspectives together to see the world as a whole and to make it a better place today and moving into the future. Thanks for listening. I'd appreciate it if you subscribe. Hey, new cool thing, there's a YouTube channel. You can check it out. There's only a couple videos up there, but watch them. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear it. I will remind you, as always, when you stop learning, you stop living. Have a great day, everybody.